Welcome to A Conservative Voice, episode 2. It's Bianca here, and today I will be discussing something very relevant, but that for some no reason it is not on the headline of every single mainstream media outlet and center of any government's agenda of discussion. So, what has been happening over the past 2 weeks? Well, China is gaining more and more power by weakening the US and their trade ties with other countries. After the 3 day summit between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, Putin said, and quote, "We are in favor of using Chinese yuan for settlements between Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America." Now, also the BRICS countries of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are officially ditching the US dollar as their trade currency and are discussing the development of their own single BRICS currency, potentially backed by gold and other minerals. Meanwhile, we have an array of deals happening across the globe that further weaken America. Let's look at Saudi Arabia. The relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia used to be one in which Saudi Arabia provided the oil to the US in exchange for security. However, those ties kind of got broken over the past decade or so and culminated with when the US withdrew from Afghanistan in 2021 under the Biden's administration, which kind of was the last straw that really gave Saudi Arabia the impression of the US being disengaged from the Middle East. Then, in December 2022, we see Saudi Arabia and China signing investment agreements ranging across several sectors and tightening their bilateral ties. And now, Saudi Arabia and Iran are both entering an economic alliance with China and Russia. Moving on, as of the 31st of March of this year, China and Brazil have signed a trade agreement that sees the abandonment of the US dollar as the intermediary, enabling the two countries to freely settle their trade and financial transactions directly without using the US dollar. Other countries are also ditching the US dollar, joining the de-dollarisation movement and gaining independence from America. As of last week, the Reserve Bank of India has made ties with central banks in 18 countries, some of which are Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Russia, Israel, Germany, even New Zealand and the UK, allowing them to use the rupees as currency to settle their trades. Even Iran has ditched the US dollar in their trade relations with Russia, replacing it with the Russian ruble. Now, we all have to be very careful here. If it keeps going like this, the US dollar will soon collapse, and the consequences will be felt greatly and globally, especially by the countries that are still tied to America. Oil has always been traded in US dollars. If that was to change, the US really risks losing its primate as a global power. Now, the US dollar has been the primary reserve currency since the end of World War II and is the currency that is generally used in international trade. And because of this, the United States has been able to be the superpower that it was, amplifying also its dominance and power to impose harsh financial sanctions. Now, the US dollar can be kind of considered the Washington muscles, both politically and economically. But if America was to be left out of the global trade, in this case, especially from the energy trade, which sees Russia as the largest exporter, the US will lose its ability to be feared by other nations, becoming weak and unable to successfully impose sanctions. And this will have catastrophic consequences for the global economy. Once the US dollar starts plunging, any country that is directly tied to the US dollar will be economically doomed. We could argue that this was all caused by America's behavior and approach to the Russia and Ukraine war. Biden's weakness has made a mess out of the US, and to be honest, he did such an amazing job at doing a horrible job that one could almost think it was voluntary. I mean, in less than 3 years, he has destroyed the American economy, divided society more than ever, managed somehow to portray America as so weak that so many countries are walking away from the US dollar, pushed the war between Russia and Ukraine, and taking all of us at the brink of World War III. Instead of aiming for reconciliation between Ukraine and Russia, the Biden administration keeps feeding Ukraine with US taxpayer money. So far, he spent up to $400 million in military equipment, according to the US Department of Defense. Not only America's strategy, if that can even be called a strategy, is not doing anything to help the war, it is pushing all the wrong buttons. It also really pushed Russia and China to get in bed together. I mean, both countries have always had tense relationships with America, given their distrust in the West and their dislike of the US on the throne of the unipolar world system. They're coming together in the removal of the US dollar for trade relations. And what is happening with the BRIC countries, and then India and Iran and Saudi Arabia. This could ultimately result in the end of the US as a global hegemony and the start of a multipolar war system. So now, having said all of this, the great question is, why on earth isn't every single media outlet talking about this and governments talking about how to tackle eventual challenges? This is the issue that everybody should be talking about. Yet, bureaucrats are too busy indicting Trump, while America is on the brink of economic collapse and pushing the world into World War III. We certainly live in interesting times, and we need to keep our eyes open on what is happening globally. There are major changes going at the speed of light, and without anybody realizing it. The world is changing, and it's changing fast. And if people don't start paying attention, once they will realize, it will be too late. We need to be united and make our governments listen. Only united we can win our battles. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening today. And if you like this content, make sure to give us a follow and share it with your friends. I will catch you on the next episode.